Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Whether you're at home or at the beach, we appreciate you coming this evening. First, before we get started, I'd like to just thank Stephen Heller for providing CART this evening. Stephen comes to us from Alternative Communication Services. Thanks so much, Steve. Appreciate it. I'm very excited about this presentation tonight because it's unlike any other webinars that we've done. This is a totally new topic, and I'd like to welcome Kim Meyer. She's the Director of Public School Partnerships at the Learning Center for the Deaf in Framingham, Massachusetts. And somehow she also finds time to be a PhD student in special education as well. She has a lot of great slides, a lot of good information, so I'm going to let her get started. There are several slides, at which point she wants to play a video, which we will do. You may need to hit the play on your end to see it. If you don't see the video playing, go ahead and just hit the play button on your screen. You should be able to see it just fine then. Without further ado, welcome, Kim.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. I'm glad that you are able to come and join with us today. If not, and you know someone that wants to see this later, please have them watch it because it will be available at a later date for you to see. I wanted to just explain the approach. I've gotten some feedback about this webinar, and so I really want to start out by saying I work at a school for the deaf in Massachusetts, and we are a bilingual school, which means that the students who attend our school receive instruction in both American Sign Language and spoken language, and English. As they go along. However, I run a program actually for kids who are appropriately mainstreamed in the public schools, who are hard of hearing and use spoken English. So we're going to talk about that group of kids today. I am the Director of Public School Partnerships, so my staff and I, we go out to school districts across Massachusetts, and we provide educational audiology and some teacher of the deaf consultation to more than 50 school districts across the state. Okay, so one question I often get asked, well, should I attend this webinar? If you work in a school in any capacity, a classroom teacher, administrator, instructional assistant, SLP, OT, everything listed on the slide here, then yes, if you work in the kitchen and you are going to have a hard of hearing child that comes across your line, then yes, you need to be here. And if you're a college student or a graduate student in any of those fields, please welcome, because I think you're going to have a lot to learn that you're not going to necessarily learn in your academic coursework. I often get asked, well, I had a student once with a hearing loss, so I don't need this information. Actually, times have changed, terminology has changed, so this webinar is definitely for you too. And if you're a parent watching this, wondering if your child's teacher should see this in the next couple of weeks when school begins, or if you live in the South, school has already begun for you, welcome. Some of this information may or may not be new to you, but it may be new to your teacher, which it will be great. You can share this information. Like I said, later it will be archived so you can share it later. Checking to make sure if I can push the right button. I'm almost done with should I attend this webinar. We're going to be going over very basic information for people who have had limited experience with a student with hearing loss in their classroom. And this information is appropriate for everyone interacting with that student. So this is how do you get started on the very first day of school. This is not to be replaced. This webinar does not replace the training that you should get from either an educational audiologist or a teacher of the deaf or ongoing consultation. This is just how do you get started on that first day. Okay, some assumptions, and I talked a little bit about the assumptions already. This webinar is going to address the needs of students that use spoken language to communicate in the classroom. It is not going to address the needs of students who utilize sign language interpreters or utilize American Sign Language. That's a completely different approach and not the goal of this webinar today. Okay, so some assumptions. We are not going to be using outdated terms. Hearing impaired might be a term that you're familiar with, and individuals with hearing loss might use this term to describe themselves, and that's okay. However, larger groups of people with hearing loss have determined that this term might be offensive, so we're not going to use this term. There are other terms that have a little more acceptance in those communities. If you've been around, if you're my age-ish or older, you may have heard the term auditory trainer. This was a common label for equipment in the last century. And so we're going to kind of move forward to different types of, calling it different types of technology on the next slide. FM systems. It's a term that describes how equipment transmits. Some equipment still transmits on FM radio waves, but some equipment does not. Sorry, I'm losing my headset. There we go. So not all equipment transmits on FM radio waves as it did in the past. So we're going to use a more encompassing term. So the terms we will use, and we're going to use deaf or hard of hearing to describe these students or their hearing loss. And we're going to use the term HAT, which is hearing assistive technology. And this encompasses all possible listening support devices that a student can wear or speaker systems that are in the classroom. Okay, so what is hearing loss? When an audiologist tests the hearing of a child or an adult, they determine what the degree of hearing loss is. And the degree refers to the level of hearing loss. And I know there's a couple of audiologists who have joined us. So the goal really here is to kind of give you the basic information. There are more degrees than I have listed here. But I think we're just going to focus on the basic levels: mild, moderate, severe, and profound. When we're talking about children who have a mild to severe hearing loss, generally we're talking about them as being audiologically hard of hearing. If the child has a profound hearing loss, then they are referred to as being audiologically deaf. So next I'm going to have you listen. Hold on. It jumps. We haven't tried this with the video. So this is a hearing loss example from the Flintstones, which is from the, okay. So those are the examples of different hearing losses: mild, moderate, and severe hearing losses. Just get to this one. So that was from the House Ear Institute, and in California. There aren't really a lot of great examples of hearing loss that I like. That's one of them, and it's a simplified way to get the point across of what the different hearing loss levels are. Just be aware that when a person has hearing loss, and we're going to talk about this throughout the webinar today, hearing loss does not has internal distortion. As you can hear, as the hearing loss got more and more significant, then you started having much more difficulty understanding what the words were. So hearing and understanding are completely different things. Just because you can hear something doesn't mean that you understand it. So audibility, this is from Carol Flexer is an audiologist, and this is from a presentation she did a number of years ago. And she just separated out audibility, which speech can be heard, but not clearly enough to understand what is said, so you're hearing the vowels. But in order to understand speech, the intelligibility, you need to hear both the vowels and the consonants. So if you go back to Charlie Brown's teacher, do you remember Charlie Brown's teacher? I have to explain who Charlie Brown's teacher is to a lot of my college students because they don't have that experience, which I think is quite sad. Everyone should know who Charlie Brown is. And listen to Charlie Brown's teacher for a moment. So when you were listening to Charlie Brown's teacher, you could hear that the teacher was talking, right? But you could not understand any of the words that she was saying. You could understand the inflection, so you knew that when there was a question, wah, 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 versus a statement when the voice is flat, wah, 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 or angry, it gets a little bit louder. It's important, though, when we're talking about our children with hearing loss, that we want to make sure that they understand, not only can hear us talking, but also understand what we say. Let me just mention, too, all of the videos that you're seeing here today, you'll be able to, you can go to my professional YouTube site, and I'll give you that access at the end, and they're all there. Hearing loss and vision loss are not the same thing. When a person has hearing loss, and I mentioned this before, and you heard this in the Flintstones video, there's distortion, and that distortion does not go away. You know, I put my glasses on, and I see 20/20, and I'm sure many of you wear glasses or contacts, and then when you put those on, you see the same as people who do not wear glasses. That is not the case when a person wears hearing aids. Hearing aids make that sound louder, but they do not, it does not clear up the distortion that is in someone's ear. See, a person that wears hearing aids does not hear the same as somebody who does not have hearing loss. I often get asked, well, aren't people with hearing loss experts at lip reading? Only about 30% of spoken English is lip readable. When a person relies on lip reading, often they're spending the majority of time guessing what is being said, or trying to fill in information, or fill in from context or world knowledge to figure out what is being said. Later, when you get a chance, I want you to go in front of a mirror, and I want you to say these words without voice. So the first group of words I want you to say is man, pan, ban. Now, if you're saying them in the comfort of your living room, you're noticing that they all feel the same in your mouth, right? When you're lip reading those words without voice, if you're saying those words without voice, I'm going to do them now without saying anything. You can't tell which word I said, okay, just based on the lip reading. The next group is kind of a silly group of words, because only one of this group would be something that most of us might say. I love you, elephant shoes, olive juice. But they all look the same, and obviously context is important. I don't know, I can't think of a context that I would use olive juice or cook with it, but we can all think of a context where we would say, I love you. However, the numbers 8, 9, 10 also look the same on the lips and cannot be lip read, just like numbers like 16, 60, again, look the same on the lips. So you want to realize that not everything can be distinct and lip readable. Okay. Back in the day, this is a while ago, I had observed 2 children. I travel a lot for my work, and I was in 2 different towns on the same day. And I observed 2 different children and had 2 very similar misunderstanding situations that I thought were important to bring to you today. The first one, the first child was M, a little girl. She was 9 years old at the time. She was working. There was 3 people in the room. Myself, a speech-language pathologist, and then the little girl. The speech pathologist was reading a book, but she was intentionally not showing the book. We were trying to assess how much the little girl understood. And so she was reading this book, and one of the things the speech language pathologist said was, the Indians were dying because of the drought and the famine. And the little girl stopped us, and she said, she had this look on her face, and she said, why were they dying if they had all that fish? And the speech pathologist and I looked at each other, and we probably had the same picture of that the emoji is on the screen right there, going, huh. So think about it. What did she think we said? Now, again, there was no background noise. It was just us working with the little girl. There was, you know, we were very close to her, and she still did not understand what we said. So, again, we said the Indians were dying because of the drought and the famine. Why were they dying if they had all that fish? Because she realized what she thought she heard, the Indians were dying because of the drought and the salmon, did not make sense, right? Drought, trout, look the same on the lips. Famine, salmon look very similar on the lips. So those were very difficult for her to figure out, even when we were in a very small room and working very closely together. If she was working in a larger group, if she were in a larger classroom, and this was read, it's very unlikely she would have stopped the teacher to say, I don't understand. So that was that's our first misunderstanding of the day. I had then traveled to another school district, and I saw Z. He was 6 years old at the time, and he was observed in his first grade classroom to start with. The teacher was introducing the book Chicka Chicka Boom Boom and discussing what coconut trees were. And I don't know if you're familiar with the story Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. If you're not, please, there's a really cute video on YouTube that you can go in and look at. But the book starts out, A told B and B told C, I'll meet you at the top of the coconut tree. So the teacher was trying to really talk about, ahead of reading the book, what coconut trees were. So afterwards, I pulled him out. And I said, let me just actually go back for a second. I pulled him out. But before then, in watching the video, or watching him in his classroom, he was completely attentive. He was sitting there, he was quiet, he was paying attention, he was not wiggling in his seat. There was no indication on his face that he did not understand what was going on. He was engaged. He didn't ask any questions, but he was definitely engaged in what was going on. So then I pulled him out, and he and I and the speech pathologist were together. She didn't see the lesson, but I did. And I asked him to tell her what, tell me about the lesson that I just saw. What did you learn about? And he said, well, today we learned about cocoon trees. So then I think I probably had the same quizzical emoji face that I had on the previous slide. And I said, okay, well, I thought maybe is it a speech and language issue that he couldn't pronounce coconut, you know, and you know, he said cocoon. He then went into a very long conversation about cocoons and butterflies, and they are in trees, and they and just the whole life cycle of the butterfly, which I later learned they had learned several months before in class. So in pulling more information out of this little boy, I realized that he didn't know what a coconut tree was. It sounded like cocoon to him, and he knew what a cocoon was. He didn't know what a coconut was. So his brain just started filling in information, and I think at some point he just didn't know where the teacher was going, so he kind of went on his own path. And became very clear that he didn't know, he was not following the lesson, even though from an observation standpoint, it was pretty clear to me that I thought he was understanding, and he thought he was understanding. This is why pre-teaching is so important. If we had taken him out of the classroom ahead of time and shown him pictures, which I ended up doing, showed him pictures of coconuts, and we looked at the book and we looked where the coconuts were and where they came from, and he then got it. when I explicitly taught him this, so it's important to do that before we introduce information in a larger classroom and send the child back in the classroom. He would have gotten it much easier if we could have sat down one-on-one, worked on the vocabulary, the new information before learning about it in the classroom. Same as the previous little girl, we were able to kind of get those questions out of the way when we were working one-on-one with her. And then when she went back into the classroom, it would have been much easier for her to understand. So words that look the same. I put this in because I really thought it was just a cute addition. I don't know if you're familiar with the whole bad lip reading, which is on YouTube. It's a short video that I took from a larger video. So if you are familiar with bad lip reading or not, this is really cute. But if you're familiar with Star Wars, this is a great video because it allows you, if you're familiar with Star Wars, you know that what is supposed to happen, what is not, what they're generally talking about. This video is really just based on the lip reading movements that they're talking about. So if you recall watching that first Star Wars movie, you know that section that you just heard was not what actually happened in that scene. So words do look very similar, and it's very easy for these young children to pick out information that they think they're understanding. What they do is their world knowledge is so limited compared to an adult's that they're going to fill in with what they know. So it's important to realize that we need to keep checking in and making sure that the child is understanding us. So one of the things that often we ask is, well, did you hear me? And I'm going to ask all of you, did you hear Charlie Brown's teacher? Yeah, you heard her. Did you understand her? No, you didn't understand her. Students, if you ask the question, can you hear me? They're generally going to say, yep, I heard you, because they did hear you. What we want to be asking is not yes or no questions, because if we ask those yes or no questions, they're going to just guess you to death. So we want to get a little more information. Tell me what I just said. Can you tell your neighbor what we're supposed to be doing? You know, ask those questions that really require them to give you a response so that you can check for comprehension. Okay, let's kind of move a little bit now to technology. Generally, hearing aids are devices that children with hearing loss wear at school, and they are family owned for the most part. For children who are audiologically deaf, many of them get what's called cochlear implants, and the picture on the bottom right is a picture of a cochlear implant. And that is, again, also family owned. When a child needs, and we're going to talk quite extensively about hat devices today as well, these are used with or without hearing aids or cochlear implants. So they may be attached to the child's hearing device, or there may be a speaker system in the room, or there may be something that the child wears around their neck, but that is generally school-owned. And those decisions are made, again, between the school audiologist or the school personnel and the family, but generally they are not. Parents don't usually send their own in, although I do have a few families that send their own equipment to school. Shari Ebert is an adult with hearing loss, and I have to say I have learned more about hearing loss from my adult friends with hearing loss and my students with hearing loss than I ever learned in school. So it's really important that we listen to these people who are living this experience. So Shari writes a blog called Living with Hearing Loss blog. And about a week ago, I was reading the Huffington Post online, and I came across, she had written a blog post that made it into the Huffington Post called The 10 Reasons Hearing Aids Are Not Like Glasses. And I quickly sent her an email and said, can I use some of this in my presentation? And she's got a great blog. I strongly suggest that you look her up. At the end, on the last slide, I have a link to her blog. But I have some of her reasons, not all of them here. So number one is hearing aids do not restore your hearing to normal. Things will be louder, but not always clearer, making it difficult to understand speech, which we talked a little bit about before. Hearing aids amplify all sounds, including those you don't want to hear, like the hum of the refrigerator and other background noise. And in classrooms, sometimes the sounds you don't want to hear might be other children talking. There could be groups of kids talking, and we want this child, my student, to be hearing this small group, but not the other groups that are going on, and that those other groups, the murmur might be interfering with their ability to understand. Hearing aids are regularly not covered under insurance. Most families pay out of pocket. There are now some, Massachusetts just passed a law where hearing aids are covered for some insurance companies. I'm still unclear about all of the who gets covered and who doesn't, and a lot of audiologists that I talk to are also unclear about that. They are very expensive. I mean, I have several families that have multiple children with hearing loss, and they might be buying hearing aids for, 3 or 4 children. That's 6 or 8 years. And hearing aids are generally between $2,000 and $3,000 each. So families are making quite a financial investment when it comes to their child with hearing loss and making sure that they can, wear these devices to school. Another reason that hearing aids are not like glasses is they need batteries to function. Generally, kids are replacing their batteries every week to 2 weeks to make them work. And this happens all the time, and I know I have a bunch of friendly faces in this that are listening to this webinar today, and they can all have stories about misplaced hearing aids and that can be mistaken for a snack by the dog. A lot of chewed up hearing aids. Dogs like the smell of ear molds and earwax, so they often will chew up hearing aids, which much to a parent's annoyance. Another limitation that Shari didn't talk about is the limitation of a microphone on the hearing aid. Hearing aid and cochlear implant, both. They only work within a very short distance. So whatever's closest to the hearing aid microphone is going to be louder than something that is far away. So in the picture below, we're going to pretend for a moment that the woman on the left who's wearing the blue dress, she has the hearing loss. And she is trying to understand the woman on the right. Her husband, who's sitting next to her between the two women, is clinking on his glass. That clinking is going to go in her hearing aid sooner because it's closer than the woman's speech on the other side of the table. It's a very small table. It's not the best example, but it's just know that whatever's closest to the hearing aid is going to go in the hearing aid loudest. So if there is a child sitting next to my student who is tapping their pencil, that tapping, and let's say there's a child that's across the room trying to communicate with my student, that tapping of the pencil is really going to interfere with their ability to hear the student across the room because hearing aid microphones only work so far. As we all know, classrooms are not quiet, close communication environments. Teachers move around, students work in groups, students make noise. As much as we'd like them not to make noise, they make noise. And so we want to be sure that we're thinking about where is the positioning the child, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Let's talk a little more about distance listening. This is a really far picture, but you know, one of the things that kind of makes me a little crazy when we're talking about you know, putting accommodations in IEPs is this concept of preferential seating. Often what is preferential for one interaction may not be preferential for another. And what I mean by preferential, and I think everybody has a little bit of a different approach to what that means, but you know, making sure that the child is seated where they can see the teacher teaching clearly, where they can see the students. It does not mean plopping them in the front seat. I had a student recently who they put preferential seating in the IEP, and before I got there, because I always try to make it, I don't put preferential seating, I'll put exactly what we're talking about. We need to make sure that the child can see the teacher space in the other students. But in this case, it said preferential seating, which meant sit the child at the front of the room. So I went in to observe because there was a concern that the child was not understanding. She was in high school, and she said, I don't really understand everything that's going on. I said, all right, let me come in and see if I can figure this out. So I sat in the back of the classroom, and I observed, and the teacher stood at the front of the room for 5 minutes and then taught from the back of the classroom behind all of the students. And I thought, well, is he doing that because I'm here? So I set up another, I asked him if he did, and he goes, yeah, I do stand back there sometimes. I said, okay, well, how about, you know, let's have you stand at the front of the room the next time I come in and see if that makes a difference. So I came back the next week, and he did it again. He sat in the front of the room, he talked for 5 minutes, and then he taught the rest of the class from the back of the room to the back of my student. And you know, in talking with my student, she says, oh, he does that all the time. So in that case, there was no preferential seating. Just plopping her in the front of the room did not help her because that's not where the teacher was teaching. So we had to talk about where to move her to, and so that she could see the teacher's face when he talked to her. But when we're talking about distance listening, we also are talking about making sure that the child's, you know, we want to be able to bring the child's teacher's voice to the child. So I often get class teachers asking, well, won't hearing aids or cochlear implants help with that distance listening? Hearing aid microphones, cochlear implant microphones, allow a person to hear someone between 5 to 8 feet away. I often tell teachers, and this is very simplified, I tell teachers that if you can't touch that child's shoulder, they can't reliably hear all of your words. Now, they probably can a little bit more of a distance, but you know that if you're within arm's length distance, they can get you. So that's kind of a nice visual to tell teachers, oh, I need to be much closer than I am. Because they say, well, I'm close. And I go, well, yeah, no, you're way too far away. So use that arm's length distance to tell them this is the length of distance that you need to be to have that interpersonal communication. I've had students who, you know, sometimes they'll get, if it's noisy, they'll get closer and closer to a person in order to hear them. You know, if you're familiar with Seinfeld, I don't want to date this this webinar, but if you're familiar with the Seinfeld Close Talker episode, where every time the girl kept getting closer and closer in order to communicate, and that was inappropriate, and that was an inappropriate communication distance. I had another student that was a situation that happened, and we couldn't figure out, they wanted to actually write a goal about interpersonal communication space. And I said, well, let's wait a minute. I think there might be a little more going on here. And I said, let's figure out when this is happening. And I noticed it was happening all the time. And so my concern was, did she have a problem with her hearing aid? And she did. She actually was having problems with her microphones. And so once we got her microphones cleaned out, her interpersonal distance was appropriate again. Another student had a very similar situation, very close talking when it was noisy. But when it was quiet, they weren't as close. So just really be aware of that if a child is getting very close to you to talk to you, that behavior is communication in my world. So if their behavior is different or unusual, it might be telling us something. This is an example of Karen Anderson is an audiologist. She wrote this concept called the listening bubble, and I really like it. So let's pretend for a moment that all of these students have hearing loss in this the top left picture, and in this teacher's communication, she is teaching math, and that only the child in that front row in that circle is within the listening bubble because he's in that interpersonal communication distance. And so the other 3 children with hearing loss aren't hearing her instruction. The picture on the right, now the teacher is a very old-fashioned looking teacher, I realize, is wearing a microphone. It's supposed to be a microphone. And now that her voice is being broadcast to all of the children. And so all of them now are encompassed in that listening bubble. So the technology that we use in the classroom can really bring the child closer to us, the teacher, in order to understand. So the child's hearing aid, their cochlear implant, what they're using in the classroom is usually not enough to hear the teacher in the classroom. And so we need to consider hearing assisted technology, or HAT. There's really the goal of HAT is threefold. It's to minimize the effects of poor listening due to distance between the teacher and student. So it's to bring the teacher closer and student closer together. Noise. And noise can be any sound that the student does not want to listen to or we don't want the student to listen to, like a fan or other groups of children. And reverberation, and that's the echo that you often hear in most classrooms. These actually, I try to bring real life into my teacher training, and these are actual quotes from actual people in actual schools. So in the first one, I had someone tell me, oh, we have one of those speaker systems. Let's just put Johnny in that room. And the second one, we had a student with an auditory trainer who left the district. Let's just hook it up to Susie's hearing aids. The audiologist needs to make those HAT decisions. Now, if a speaker system is the most appropriate and you have one, awesome. If you have a personal HAT system that happens to be appropriate, working, sounds clear, and is appropriate for the child's hearing aids, and we can reuse it, awesome. But we can't just make those decisions without an audiologist involved. It's really important to have an audiologist involved because you know, and I could go on and on and on with stories about this. You know, you don't want a mistake made when a child, you know, hooking something up. I will tell a very short story about a school district that decided to hook up an FM system to a child's hearing aids without an audiologist involved, never checked the hearing aids, never listened to them, and what we found out 6 months later is every time they connected the hearing aid to the FM system, it shut the hearing aid off. So, and they couldn't figure out why the child's grades were crashing. So it's really important that the audiologist is the person to make the recommendation and implement the technology, because we want to make sure that it's working and working well and working appropriately for the child. And I've also had teachers, you know, situations have come up where the child gets the equipment fit to their hearing aid and hearing loss, and then it just gets handed to the teacher. There you go. Teachers need that training. It's really important. You know, you are the one that are going to have to use it every day. Just saying, oh, put this microphone on and talk to the kid, you'll be fine. There's really a lot more to it. So you want to ask for that training. And sometimes it's a little hard to go back to your administrator and say, I don't know how this works. That's okay. I mean, I don't expect any teacher who's never touched a piece of equipment before to know how it works. It's important that you get that training, so ask for it. And it's also important to make sure that it's working every day. You know, I certainly have had other stories where it worked on the first day that I set it up, and for some reason it didn't work a week later and nobody realized it. So we need to make sure also that it's working on a daily basis. I get this question a lot. Do I really need to wear a microphone? My voice is really loud. Yes. You do need to wear the microphone, even if your voice is loud. When your voice is loud, you're making vowels louder. You can't make the consonants as loud as the vowels. The soft consonants hold that key to intelligibility. Remember that understanding? So think of the word brother. Okay? If you go out in your yard tonight, tomorrow, and I want you to yell the word brother as loud as you can. If you're one of these loud people that are talking, you say you're loud, I want you to go in the backyard and yell brother as loud as you can. And what you're going to notice is the and the are going to be loud. But what's going to be quiet is the brr, you can't make that loud, and the okay, so what you're making loud is R, but you're missing the brr parts of that word. What a hat system will do is it will allow the student to hear your vowels and your consonants equally loud. Another question that I also get asked is, well, I have a loud voice. I don't want to wear a speaker system because I don't want to blow the kids' ears out. Really good question. Generally what happens, hearing aids and cochlear implants have a limit to how loud they can make things. So if your voice goes over that limit, the hearing aid's just going to stop you, and it's not going to allow the child to be hurt in any way. So don't worry about that. Okay, the next video, and just wait a second, Nancy, I want to explain it for just a moment. The next video is a Jim Damasceno used to be at the Vermont Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing, a wonderful program. Unfortunately, has since closed, but they made a 6-minute video, and this is the whole video is worth watching. I'm not showing you the whole video today. Again, this will be available. The link will be available on my YouTube site, so you can go right to it and watch the whole thing. I cut it down so that we can just watch a segment of it. And the segment you're going to be watching is, so Jim is wearing a microphone, a speaker system. Sorry, not a speaker system. He's wearing a microphone to a personal FM. The personal FM is on a dummy head, and then you're going to be listening through that hearing aid. So that's what you're going to be listening through. He's going to walk away from the hearing aid, and so you're going to see the effects of distance and what that sounds like and how much your voice goes down when you're far away from a student with hearing loss. And then he's going to add noise to the situation and continue to talk. So you're going to notice that it's going to be much harder for you to understand what he's saying. And then he's going to turn on the microphone to the hat system that he's using. And then you'll see how much it brings his voice up. This part, just so you're aware, is already captioned. So it's already there. Thank you, Nancy. You can go ahead. So I really liked that video. I think it's a great description of why those hat systems are really important for our students. You know, the distance and noise is really their enemy for understanding. And so using that microphone is really going to be important to bring your voice to wherever they are. So I encourage you to go and watch the entire video at some point, because I think it's really a great demonstration of what our students go through in the classroom. So if you are asked to wear a microphone as part of the child's hat system, how you wear it is important. So you know, why is she showing this hang 10 picture? So if you're asked to wear a microphone attached to your shirt, I want you to do this right now. I want you to take this hand shape, okay? And I want you to take your thumb and I want you to put it on your chin. And your pinky goes right on your chest, okay? And where that your pinky is where you're going to attach the microphone. And this is about, we can say that microphone should be 4 to 6 inches away from your mouth. And if you do that, and consistently put it there, then it is 4 to 6 inches away from your mouth at all times, right there. You want to make sure so clip it, you want to make sure it's pointing up, you want to make sure that there's no necklaces or anything that can hit it, because if something is hitting it, then it's going to sound like this to the student, and that would be really uncomfortable. I often tell teachers that if you're putting the microphone here, you're this distance, I'm going to move over a little bit, you are this distance, this far away from where the child is. So it's as if you're standing right here at all times next to the child so that they can hear you. Some things to remember about microphones. Again, using that, if you use the microphone attached to your shirt, the student is going to hear you and is going to hear the students immediately around him. I'm sure you've had the experience of sitting in an auditorium and maybe somebody down front, you were sitting in the back, somebody down front raised their hand to ask a question, and then you're yelling, "Repeat the question," right? Because you don't hear what the person down front of an auditorium is saying. The same thing is happening here. If we are not repeating those questions or repeating those answers, my student is not getting them. So if you ask a question, how many miles is it from point A to point B? And you point to, you know, Billy across the room, and Billy gives you an answer, and you go, right. So they heard the question, they heard the right, they didn't hear the response. It's also important to repeat incorrect answers. And I know I have a lot of conversations with teachers about this because they don't want to reinforce the wrong information. And I totally get that, but it's important to realize that my students don't get those answers at all. And there are ways, sorry about that, there are ways to do this because we also don't want to make our other students feel bad about giving a wrong answer. Excuse me. So one of the things I often say is, well, you know, if Billy is saying, you know, Billy gives the answer of 3 and the answer is incorrect, then we could say, well, Billy said the answer is 3. Does anybody have a different answer? So we don't want to make Billy feel bad, but now everybody realizes that the answer is not 3, and we need to all be rethinking, because that is, using that information is how children are going to make those decisions, those educational decisions, those thinking decisions. Oh, that was wrong? That was my answer too. Oh, let me think about this again. I recently had a situation before the end of the school year with one of my high schoolers. I also do have a hearing loss, so I was sitting in the back of the room on one side, he was sitting on the other side, and it was a math class, and the teacher had asked a question, and the teacher had asked a student to respond. I did not hear the answer. Teacher did not repeat it, which means I knew my young man didn't hear it either. At some point, and it was an incorrect answer. And at some point, my student raised his hand, and he gave the same, what we figured out later was the same answer. And the kids were all like, laughing. And that was hard. It was hard for him because he's really bright. He just didn't know that that answer had already been given. So these are the things you want to be thinking about. How do we get all of the children to get all of that information, and making sure that they're understanding what's going on. The picture on the lower right is an older version, but there are some HAP systems that have what's called pass-around microphones. I've had some teachers who really use them successfully. You know, in passing the, you know, having children pass them to each other. I would not pass around your teacher microphone because that certainly has some issues and you don't want it to break because it has cords and that kind of thing. But before we had pass around microphones, we asked teachers to repeat. So those are your two options. Either repeat what the other children say or utilize a pass around microphone and utilize it all the time. Some more things to remember. Again, that 4 to 6 inches below your chin is where the microphone should be. So the child will be listening 4 to 6 inches away from his ear, hearing your voice 4 to 6 inches away from his ear at all times. Make sure that microphone is pointing upward. I can tell you, I've gone into some classrooms and the microphone is pointing, you know, that way, and the child can hear the kids talking over here, but not the teacher that's talking here. I could do a whole webinar on all of the stories that I've heard children over here that they shouldn't have. I can tell, and believe me, they tell me everything. I go in and I know which teacher is pregnant that they haven't announced it yet because the teacher was wearing the microphone and told a colleague that they were pregnant, and now my student knows too. I've heard teachers going to the bathroom with their microphones on. I've heard teachers talking disparagingly about the child's parents. So there's a lot of good and not so good things that my students have heard or even just thought they heard. So you want to be sure that if you're having a private conversation to turn off that microphone. Or many of the microphones also have a mute function. So figure out, ask somebody to teach you, you know, when they're teaching you about the whole microphone, ask somebody to teach you, how do I mute it? The other thing you want to remember is you want to turn off that microphone when working with other groups of children so that the child with hearing loss can concentrate on his work and doesn't hear you talking with, you know, Billy and Bobby across the room. An idea for group work is you want to get a plexiglass picture frame, attach the microphone to it, and then you can move the frame around so that the children don't have to hold it. Just if you have to wrap the microphone cord, you want to do it in a way so that it's easier, so that you're not doing it incorrectly, which is the picture on the bottom. The other thing to realize is the cord itself is usually the antenna. So make sure that that cord is completely unwrapped when you're wearing it so that the child gets the most benefit. When we're talking about accommodations, we need to make sure that our children are getting the same access to your communication and the instruction. So the first picture is when we don't take into consideration the unique needs of the student, they may not be able to access what's going on. And the second picture is when we remove the barriers and provide the students what they need, they can take information in the same way that their hearing peers do. So this is just a visual representation, but I really like this. It's a nice visual reminder. So I have some accommodations listed here. This is not an exhaustive list, and it's not appropriate. You know, we probably have teachers from preschool to high school, so there's not, you know, some of the things for preschool is not appropriate for high school, but it's important to realize that, and there can be even more accommodations than I've listed here, but just some beginnings. The acoustics of a classroom is important. What doesn't seem noisy to you will cause a student with hearing loss to have extreme difficulty understanding. Often I will go into a room and hear a fan and point it out to the teacher, and they say, I never noticed it before. I did. So you want to, obviously it's hot now. Sometimes if you have air conditioning on, that's going to indicate, have some issues with noise. We want to keep doors and windows closed during instruction, but, I understand that we need to balance what's hot and the noise level. So just be aware of that. If a child is in a classroom that's with carpeting, that carpet will acoustically treat the room. It reduces the room noise. Tennis balls or any kind of chair feet will prevent the scraping sound, but is not going to reduce the room noise. Some teachers like to put on background noise when the kids are working independently. This can be distracting, but you want to be sure to turn it off when you're addressing the entire group, because otherwise it becomes we can't ask the student with hearing loss to listen through the music to your instruction. It's really hard, not impossible, for a child to lip read and take notes simultaneously. The easiest thing is just give the teacher notes. If there's a PowerPoint, give the PowerPoint so that the child can follow along. And if you want the student to write something that is not written on the PowerPoint or written on the notes, have them write it, but don't speak during that time. Make sure that they're completely writing and not having to listen simultaneously. Use an overhead or any of the technology that we're using these days so that you can write and talk and face the class at the same time. If you turn around and are writing on the board and talking, again, they're not going to get that lip reading ability. So you want to be sure that you're facing the classroom as much as possible. If you need to write on the board, which many teachers do that, but don't talk at the same time. Students may not understand announcements, classroom announcements, because they can't lip read. And generally the quality of the speaker might be poor, and often announcements, particularly in the younger grades, are children providing the announcements, which makes it even harder to hear. You want to provide, for children who can read, you want to provide written text in some way. Sometimes they have them online, or they're given a written, handed a piece of paper with that information. Even if it doesn't pertain to them, they need to have the same access that other students have. So it's really important that, I know it's not you're in third grade and they're talking about the second grade field trip. So don't say, oh, that doesn't pertain to you. A lot of hard of hearing kids are really bothered by, oh, we're not talking about you. Oh, it doesn't have anything. Let them decide if it pertains to them or not, because you don't know if they have a second grade brother who may not be going on the field trip. Or didn't know about the field trip. And then if a child is younger, then repeat those accommodations. Seating. The student needs to see the teachers and the peers. So we want to kind of get away from the preferential seating concept. And if they're for younger kids, we want to, if we're talking about circle time, seat them in a circle so that they can see each other. If you sit them like stadium seating, they're not going to be able to see the kids in front of them. They're not going to be able to hear them. So circle time should be circles, classroom seated circles. Seat them away from the door, rate them noise sources, and then also make sure that their backs to the window, because if they're facing the window and the sun comes in, there's going to be glare, and it's going to be very hard to understand and lip read when there's glare. If you're going to be showing videos, I say videos, I shouldn't say videos, but if you're going to be showing streaming of any kind or what have you, turn on the captioning before the child needs it. The captioning is the words that you're seeing, like today, you're seeing, this webinar is being captioned, and many students use the captioning at home on their home televisions. So know how to turn it on before you need it. If I had my druthers, then we would be having it on all the time for all of the kids and never turn it off. It's quite clear, the research is quite clear that it's beneficial for kids with who are English as a second language. So if you keep it on all the time, that would be great. Don't ask the student if they need it turned on. because they do. I'm just telling you they do. I've seen teachers ask, the child says no, and then I go to ask them, what did you learn from the video, and they can't tell me. So don't ask them, just do it. There's a free caption video program run by the U.S. Department of Education, and you can get free videos and streaming, and that's the information. So your school can sign up for it, it's free, and parents can sign up for it. So do you know enough to get started on your first day of school? Don't ask yes/no questions, right? You want to avoid questions requiring that yes/no response. So if I were sitting with all of you in a room, I would say, what did you learn today, so that you can get started on your first day of school. And beware of how tiring it is to lip read. The amount of concentration for students with hearing loss to understand language and academics is much greater than for their hearing peers. Some students channel that fatigue in behavioral ways, and others just, it's like a light switch. They just turn out. This is Shari Ebert's web blog and website, and I suggest you go take a look at that. All of the video links, and they're ones I use for my college students that I teach, my undergrads and my graduate students. If you Google Kim Meyer, with the Kim has a Y in it, Kim Meyer audiology videos, that will take you to my professional YouTube page, and you can get all of the videos that we talked about today. And I'm just going to leave you all with this. To begin your first day of school, I hope everyone has a great first day. I hope your children have a great first day. I'm excited for a new school year, and have a great 2016-2017 year.
Kim, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, although I asked if there was one burning question out there to please post it. And somebody, Yonique, said, we are having a meeting September 24th focusing on children with hearing loss. If Kim could tell one thing to parents and teachers, what would that be? That's a loaded question.
No, I have a great answer. Keep your expectations high.
Good one.
These kids will surprise you. They will surprise you. But you have to know how to get them to that high expectation. And bring in the right team so that you can support that student with the right knowledge.
Good advice. Very good advice. If you liked this webinar this evening, mark your calendar for the third Wednesday of every month when we present a different topic of interest to people with hearing loss. And if you're interested in joining HLAA, please do so at hearingloss.org. We have lots of great information there, and as a member you receive our magazine and lots of other benefits too. So appreciate everybody attending this evening, and we'll try to get this posted on our website as quickly as possible, hopefully by the end of next week. Thank you again, Kim, very, very much. And happy back to school, everybody. Thank you. Good night.